Furdu, some things never change, and that is incredibly evident with you. My Furdu 2022 experience started in September 2021 when I was rejected from the dealer's den. It was noted by convention staff that due to hotel renovations, they could only fit 15 tables in the allocated space and had nearly 50 applicants, but that if they got level 4, that I'd be guaranteed a spot. This happened to pretty much every applicant I knew, and given that Furdu is the biggest furry event in Australia, it came as a massive hit to all of us. 3 months later, we received notice that they were getting level 4, and that if we still wanted to exhibit, we just had to let them know. Fantastic! In that email was a fun little notice saying, please send through your Telegram ad. I have long-standing issues with Telegram and its use by furrycons, so this isn't Furdu specific, but I am going to take this opportunity to talk about it. I will take all opportunities to talk about it. I think using Telegram, Discord, or other chat-focused platforms to organise conventions is highly unprofessional. I've dealt with Telegram chats in place of emails at 2 furrycons before, and after digging through tons of stickers, self-advertisements, and general chatting to find bump-in information, I stopped using it. I could never find the information I needed and it wasn't posted anywhere else, which was a massive pain in the ass and led to a lot of miscommunication. Event runners should also stop using it as a means of announcing information, because announcements get buried under messages I don't need to read and don't have time to read. I know there's many others that share this sentiment. This specifically applies to furry conventions, since all other events I deal with do their communication via email. If anyone watching this runs a furry convention, please stop using Telegram and start using emails for important announcements and information. You're used to, so I know you can. Also, I hate that Telegram automatically downloads every sticker, GIF, photo, and video sent in the app by default. If you use Telegram and you're noticing your phone is going slow, you might want to check its internal folder. Credit where it's due, Furdu did continue to send me important information via email. I received a link to the form to give them my dealer's information about parking, bump-in, trading hours, what can and cannot be displayed, relevant hotel rules, power, and volunteer support. They also checked in to confirm whether or not I had a helper so they could put our badges together. The strange thing is, they made an exception for me. None of my friends got these emails and had to regularly check the Telegram chat or get the information off me. I felt like some kind of insider who got special knowledge ahead of time, but in reality, my emails were just easier to find than information shoved in a chat stream. Funny, that. While I do appreciate that Furdu staff went out of their way to email me, it's just as easy to set up a mailing list and send that information to everyone on it. They sent us all PayPal invoices. Mailing lists are a step easier than that. Speaking of, Furdu has always used PayPal for their exhibitor invoices, and I do appreciate having them sent directly to me. For a bit of history, in 2019, Furdu started charging dealers' den vendors a $50 exhibition fee on top of their registration. Before that, successful applicants just had to buy registration, which is $100, and supply some information about what they'd be selling. There was still an application process that involved filling in a form, but adding an exhibition fee is something I support and was happy to see them implement. $50 is extremely accessible, and even when combined with the registration fee, it's cheaper than any big-name pop culture event in Australia. For the 2022 event, they raised that fee to $60, which is still incredibly reasonable and a decision I have no issues with. Furdu is held at the Mantra on View in Surfers Paradise. It's a high-rise hotel with multiple meeting rooms, which is apparently a rarity in surfers, but I'll get to that later. It's located between Surfers Paradise Beach and a shopping centre called Chevron Renaissance. There's plenty of restaurants and cafes within walking distance, and it's on the tram line. This year we dared to explore more of Surfers and found an outdoor street mall with even more restaurants and cafes. We didn't explore this area too much because it was incredibly busy with street performers, shoppers, and people visiting the nearby nightclubs. Surfers Paradise is a tourist hotspot, and that definitely showed this year. Both my flights were full and there were people galore on the streets. It felt very strange and I wasn't keen on being around so many unmasked people, so I kept my outing short and sparse. The dealer's den, as mentioned, is on the 4th floor of the Mantra in a large function room. One wall of the room is entirely glass that opens onto a balcony, so there's plenty of natural light. There's also a water cooler and bathrooms at the far end. Furdu sets the tables up in aisles with fabric backboards for the tables in the middle. Due to hotel rules, exhibitors aren't allowed to put anything on the walls, and it would be pretty much impossible anyway. Most of the walls in this room are painted, with the exception of the windows on the right and a section of moving walls on the left. The moving walls are foamy and blue tack doesn't work on them. In the past, I've seen people in the middle aisles use Velcro dots on the fabric walls, but it's uncommon as the blanket rule is don't put anything on the walls. As the biggest con of its kind in Australia, Furdu brings in a hell of a lot of people, but space in the dealer's den is minimal. This year, there were 41 exhibitors for a total of 53 tables. I heard a fair number of attendees and exhibitors alike talking about the restricted space. This has been a growing issue for Furdu for a number of years, but due to hotel and COVID capacity restrictions, there's only so many people that can actually be let into the event. This goes for both attendees and exhibitors. For this reason, Furdu sells tickets ahead of the event and will only have door tickets available if they didn't sell out. From memory, they didn't have any tickets available at the door at their last event, but I heard some attendees were able to buy single day passes this year. As usual, Furdu was at capacity again this year, which I believe caps at around 1,000 people. This could be wrong, so if you know what the actual capacity is, please let me know in the comments. When picking up our registration and badges, we had our vaccination certificates checked, but that was the only point over the entire weekend they were asked for. I'd like to note that the hotel didn't check us at any stage, but convention staff did. Masks were only mandatory in the dealer's den, and it showed. At a guess, about 95% of the people in the dealer's den wore masks, and it was fantastic to see, but as soon as you left that room, the masks were off. The majority of people I saw wearing masks outside the den were the people I was travelling with. You'd think people would wear masks in elevators, but they did not. Since I was working the entire weekend, I kept my mask on whenever I left my room, but was extremely concerned about the number of people not wearing them outside the dealer's den. I'm not sure what the rules were about wearing them in the panel rooms, but I really hope they were under the same conditions as the vendors hall. Bump-in started at midday on Thursday, but no clear end time was given. There was also an hour of bump-in allocated on Friday morning before the den opened to sponsors at 10 AM. One major thing I've always disliked about Furdu is the opening hours for the dealer's den. They're entirely inconsistent and weren't well adhered to this year, which caused issues for the dealers. Friday's hours are 10 AM until 12 PM, then 1 PM until 5 PM. Saturday is 1:30 PM till 5:30 PM. Sunday is 11 AM until 1:30 PM, then 2:30 PM until 5 PM. I'd like to note that the first hour of Friday's trade was open specifically for sponsors. The hour breaks on Friday and Sunday are lunch hours for dealers, where all attendees are shooed from the room and only dealers are allowed in. The hotel doesn't allow food or drink in the function rooms, so we're not able to eat on the job like at most other conventions. So I do appreciate the lunch hour. During the lunch hour, a convention staff member sits at the door and checks badges to ensure only dealers enter, but otherwise the door is kept closed. One major issue this year was that convention staff didn't do a thorough enough job of clearing attendees out of the room for the lunch breaks, meaning customers were still making purchases well into the lunch hour. They ring a bell to mark 5 minutes before the den closes and when the den closes, but usually someone also yells across the entire room. I saw one staff member walking up to attendees one by one and gently reminding them that the den was closed on Friday. Luckily, this was cleaned up Sunday and someone did shout that everyone had to leave, but Friday's lunch hour was delayed by about 10 to 15 minutes. We left in a rush to try and get some food before having to be back, before it was announced via Telegram that the dealer's den would be opening 10 minutes later to accommodate the late start. Luckily, I had mates nearby that used the app, so I was kept in the loop, but the delay shouldn't have happened in the first place. The late start on Saturday is to accommodate the fursuit parade, and in my experience, Furdu is the only convention that closes the vendors hall during this time. At other Australian fur cons, I found trade is actually great during fursuit parades, as people take advantage of the quieter time to look around while a room isn't crowded. Maybe it's because I don't go to the parade, but I would love that time Saturday morning to sell more wares, particularly this year, but I've made a habit of going to the beach instead to make myself feel better. The only thing that makes me miss Queensland are Victoria's frigid cold beaches, so I savour the tropical ocean while I can. Friday morning was pretty busy, as expected, but I didn't have much traffic during the sponsor hour. I find the sponsors are more likely to rush to something they've seen online so they don't miss out. And as someone that doesn't offer much furry-focused stuff, I often spend that hour working on commission samples. Traffic picked up once all attendees were allowed to enter, and I had a pretty good morning, but it went absolutely dead after lunch. I'm not sure if that sentiment was shared by other exhibitors, as I didn't speak to many on Friday, but I had a severe dip in sales and quickly realised I was gonna have to pick up the pace if I wanted to reach my profit goals. I nearly broke even on Friday, but managed to quickly make up my costs on Saturday. Saturday was busier and I had a lot of customers. My neighbours even pointed out they'd noticed I'd had a lot more people at my table, and I was almost able to match my Friday sales in half the time. I'm convinced that if we'd been able to trade all day Saturday, I would have done so much better overall. At this stage, I spoke to a few exhibitors at the far end of the room where the tables stop, and they said it had been extremely quiet, much quieter than my area on the left. I wondered if the large double booths along the right-hand wall had anything to do with that, since having a smaller single table next to massive displays can detract attention away from you. This area near the water cooler has always been a dead zone in the room, so I do feel for people put at the furthest end of the aisle. Something I noticed was a slight shift in Furdu's demographic. At the last convention, I took some Dungeons & Dragons merchandise and had only one person really talk about it, and they were clearly not a furry that had been dragged in by their family. This year, I had a lot more attention on my D&D merch and managed to nearly sell out of Lucky Dip dice bags. I was really happy to see this shift, but was immediately hit with the whiplash of actually selling some Anime Idol merch. Somehow, I was able to find some Love Live fans and moved some merchandise that I haven't been able to sell at dedicated anime conventions or online. It was overwhelmingly wholesome, and I still haven't come down from that high. To pivot off that high note, I want to talk about one of the vendors near the door. As soon as you walked into the room, Big Play Games had a 2-table display selling plushies, fidget toys, card games, anime figures, and other similar products. They had some Miku figures, and I did feel threatened as Furdu's resident weeb. I've never had competition at furry cons in that department before, and I was ready to metaphorically throw hands if necessary. I saw some attendees walking around with plushies they'd bought, but overall, I'm not sure how successful the table was. I can't imagine they were furries, and my guess is that they saw an event was on and tried to cash in on it. I would love to know more about those vendors, so if you have insider knowledge or were the people running that table, please share your information in the comments. I spoke to a few more people positioned in different spots around the room, and the general consensus seemed that location wasn't really a factor, unless you were in the back right corner, of course. The room is small enough that you can see it all in a short amount of time, and there's no clear customer flow. When you enter the room, there's 2 possible ways to go and a few spots that can potentially bottleneck. This spot in the back left corner stood out to me as the biggest congestion risk, but I didn't notice any particularly bad traffic jams. Someone in the first aisle I spoke to said they'd noticed most attendees walked straight forward instead of turning into the first aisle. This tells me the customer flow of the room is questionable, but obviously working with a small space and many tables is going to cause those kind of issues. Sunday was a ghost town. I don't know how else to describe how bad it was. Usually Sunday is full of people trying to spend their last $10 on something before they leave, vendors finally getting the chance to wander the alley, and people who'd been fursuiting on Saturday. That wasn't the case this time, and I made my lowest daily sales on record that day, like of my entire exhibition career. I can confidently put this down to the reported COVID cases that were present at the event. Furdu posted about this on Facebook afterwards and urged people to get tested and isolate. I won't go into details on this, but it goes without saying that you shouldn't be going out in public if you're sick. In general, Furdu 2022 was alright. I've had better performing Furdus in the past, so I wasn't overly thrilled with my sales, but I did break even, and that's a lot better than my last Queensland con. I did notice a lot of the artists around me had sold out of their commissions, while mine were barely moving. This actually works very well for me, so I didn't mind at all, but I did note a record low in my commission sales this year. I purposely offered very few but specific styles so I wouldn't get overwhelmed, but I think it actually bit me in the ass because I opted for more expensive, bigger pieces that I believed would sell. I'm going to be revising my convention commission offerings for Aurawra later this year. Before I go, I want to mention that Furdu has outgrown the mantra on view, and I know they're aware of it, so I'm very keen to see how the event progresses in the future. I do think buyer burnout is an issue for attendees because we quite literally are the same group of exhibitors selling wares there every year. I didn't have many new products on offer this year, and that absolutely reflected in my sales. I relied heavily on commissions to bring in profits, but I missed the mark by quite a bit and it did show. Although I've noticed a lot of new names on the list this year, I don't think it was enough to reinvigorate attendees. As present Furdu exhibitors, the biggest thing we can do to reinvigorate our sales is bring in new items and commission styles. But Furdu as a convention can expand and bring in more exhibitors. I know it probably sounds like more exhibitors means more competition, but that's not actually the case. Allow me to explain. Furry conventions are incredibly niche, which means there's a much smaller pool of artists and vendors to work with. Repeat attendees who see the same names every year are going to get bored of the dealer's den and stop visiting it. But a bigger den with more names will reinvigorate those attendees and bring them back in. Obviously this calls for a bigger convention space, which is where things get tricky, but I firmly believe it's time for Furdu to grow into a bigger event. I understand they've been looking for a new location for a few years, but finding a hotel that suits the needs of a convention in Surfers Paradise specifically is tricky. A recent announcement confirmed they've been able to find a new hotel, which is excellent news, particularly given the furry convention scene in Australia right now. We have very few stable furcons, so Furdu has a lot of pressure on it to succeed, as does newcomer Aurawra. And that's all I've got on Furdu 2022. I'm keen to see if I can get myself back on track for 2023 because I was on an upward scale with my Furdu profits and this year they plummeted. It was an incredibly valuable learning experience and I'll be taking all this knowledge to the next events later in the year. Until then, take care.